Hey, everyone. Welcome into another exciting episode of the Easter Pod. I'm your host, Corey Easterday, and on today's episode, I have joining me Brent Barger. Brent is a staff member at Crossroads Church in Lexington, Kentucky. Brent and I go way back from my days going to Love Canton Church in Canton, Ohio, when I was a student at Malone University. Brent and I became friends then, and Brent is originally from the Lexington, Kentucky area. So that's where he and his family moved back to in 2011, and Brent and I have remained close friends. We chat about it a little bit in our episode, but I got to visit him in Lexington a couple times last year, spend time with him and his family. It's always a treat to be able to chat with Brent. He is, like me, a fellow sports nerd. We love talking about NBA, NFL, all sorts of stuff. So I thought, what better person to bring on to talk about The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary that just came out last week, and to talk about the NFL draft and get some of his reactions on it as well, in addition to mine. So Brent and I, this episode's a little bit different from a typical one in that we're not going to be necessarily talking about what Brent does for a living or diving as deep into that, but he's someone who's very insightful and knowledgeable about sports. And honestly, we're just two dudes who have a deep love and passion for sports, breaking down our reactions to some pretty big events in that world right now. It's everything's shut down. So this documentary, the NFL draft, I believe the NFL draft had its highest rating ever. So it just shows you what an appetite there is for sports right now, and that's why Brent and I wanted to do this episode, because it's something we enjoy, and right now it kind of helps fill the void while there's no sports going on. So before I get into my conversation with Brent, I did want to break down a few thoughts on some of the latter part of the draft, because when Brent and I have our conversation, it was immediately after round one, so we weren't able to dive into some of the other stuff that happened. But the NFL draft was really exciting this year. There was a lot of cool stuff. It was really fun to watch, and some of the stuff that happened after round one that I found particularly interesting was the Cincinnati Bengals with the first pick in round two, getting T. Higgins, the wide receiver, and pairing him with Joe Burrow is going to be really exciting. And they got their first round pick from last year that was injured. He's coming back on the offensive line, so that whole Cincinnati Bengals offense is going to be really transformed this year, and it's going to be really cool to see. There were speaking of wide receivers, I think I read a stat somewhere that this draft was tied with the most wide receivers taken total in a draft with any previous draft in the common draft era. So absolutely loaded class at wide receiver, and you saw a lot of the skill position players get taken off the board more so in round two. One of the things I thought was interesting is, in round two, the Giants picked safety Xavier McKinney, and I wrote in my notes, kind of in a surprised manner, how much I really like the Giants draft this year, which is surprising considering all the, Dave Gettleman has essentially become a meme, the Giants GM. But I thought myself and a lot of other people I was reading thought the Giants actually did a really good job this year. So the Panthers, speaking of doing a great job, the Carolina Panthers went all defense. I believe they had 7 total picks, and it was all defense. They only drafted on the defensive side of the ball, which new head coach Matt Rule, it looks like that was part of the plan. They have a lot of dynamic offensive players. They lost Cam, but they got Teddy Bridgewater, Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, all those guys. So I think the Panthers are going to be a really exciting and well-balanced team to watch this year. And living in the Charlotte area, I am a Browns fan first and foremost. I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio, 29 years of my life. But I got to say, I've adopted the Panthers as a team I root for. They are exciting to watch, and they have a great fan base down here. So I'm really pumped for what they're going to do this year. I love the Colts trading up for running back Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. I think it's totally between him and Clyde Edwards-Helaire for that number one overall pick in dynasty leagues, but I both guys are going to go high in normal fantasy drafts too this year. Imagining Jonathan Taylor doing work as a 3-down back behind that Colts offensive line is just it's really exciting for fans of the game. And I thought overall the Colts had a really great draft also. Browns grabbed safety Grant Delpit out of LSU in the second round. And I saw Mel Kiper in his draft grades, gave the Browns a B+ overall. They got their left tackle for the foreseeable future in round 1, and they got a really good starting safety. I see no reason, and we talked a little bit about this on the episode I did with Jordan Zerm, episode 8, which you should check out. But the Browns, there's no reason for them not to be able to take a step up this year and to do way better than they did last year, make the playoffs. I really hope this kind of helps them build on what success they have had and to have even more going into the future. One of the things I found particularly interesting in this draft was because of the deep wide receiver class, you had the Broncos taking Jerry Jeudy in the first round. Then they took KJ Hamler out of Penn State in the second round, and we're seeing some pretty interesting wide receiver tandems and trios being created out of this draft. For example, now the Broncos have KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. The Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. The Bengals have AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. There's going to be some exciting offensive combinations coming up this season, and this draft, because it's so loaded with skill players, I think for fantasy football this coming year, assuming, hoping that everything kind of goes as normal with the sport being played, or that teams are able to play and have games, I think it could be one of the most exciting years of football to watch yet. And final couple thoughts here. One of the big surprises of round 2, in addition to the Packers taking A.J. Dillon at running back to presumably be behind Aaron Jones, so the Packers not drafting a wide receiver, in the early couple rounds in what is a stacked wide receiver class is just mind-boggling. Building on what Brent and I talk about them picking quarterback Jordan Love, trading up to get him. But, one of the other big surprises, speaking of quarterbacks being drafted, was Jalen Hurts going at number 53 to the Eagles to sit behind Carson Wentz. Kevin Clark, who is a staff writer for The Ringer, he does a lot of their NFL coverage, talked about a conversation he had, and I retweeted it. It was a conversation he had with Jeffrey Lurie about how the Eagles don't view it as a backup quarterback, they view it as having a second quarterback. And, the Eagles' history, they won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. They love to stack up their quarterbacks, so as surprising as it was, that one made a little bit more sense than the Packers trading up to take Jordan Love. And lastly here, want to talk about, the Jets drafted Denzel Mims out of Baylor in the second round, and it's clear they're trying to do everything they can to help Darnold with taking Mekhi Becton in the first round and then grabbing Denzel Mims in the second round. Oh, and one of the other notes I had here, J.K. Dobbins, running back out of Ohio State, very exciting to watch, going to the Ravens. And I made a note here, as a Browns fan, loving the Ravens roster as much as I do is very confusing because they do have such an exciting and dynamic roster, but I'm supposed to hate the Ravens. And overall, I'm not rooting for them, but man, are they fun to watch. There's a ton of other notable stuff that went down, but I want to go ahead and get to my conversation with Brent because he and I had a lot of fun talking about The Last Dance, talking about the draft, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And, like I said, we're just two dudes that love sports, so we come at it from that angle. So we don't have the expertise that a lot of other folks do out there, but we're able to have a really fun dialogue and really break down and each provide a different and unique perspective that I think you're really going to enjoy. One last reminder to check out the Easter Pod on social media. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Check us out there, interact with the show. And if you like the show, be sure to leave us a rating and leave a review and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Without further ado, my conversation with Brent Barger. All right, welcome into another episode of the Easter Pod. We are joined today by Brent Barger, making his first ever appearance on the show, which is really exciting. Brent is a longtime friend, and we originally met when he and his family were living in Canton, Ohio, and Brent was working at the church I went to at the time. Brent currently lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and he and I have bonded a lot over the years over our mutual love of sports, NBA, NFL, on and on. And we had talked before I started the Easter pod about doing some pods together. So I thought, what better guy to bring on to talk about the new MJ doc, The Last Dance, to talk about round one of the NFL draft. And before we get into all that, it needs to be said up top. Neither Brent or I are experts in the traditional sense of the word. We're just two dudes that have a deep love and knowledge and passion for sports. So that's what we're going to do today. And Brent, how are you doing today, man?
I'm pretty good overall. I mean, we're all in the midst of, being at home a lot and navigating this new world. But we're doing, I'm doing pretty good. My family's doing pretty good. I'm excited to be on this with you. Yeah, we're hanging in there.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. How are you making use of the time without any NBA or live sports to watch?
Yeah, good question. Still working. I work for a church called Crossroads in Lexington. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. And so still doing a decent amount of work. Part of my role is to kind of get out in the community and try to help people in need. And so we've been doing a good amount of that, and a lot of Zoom meetings, and been doing some puzzles, Corey. Yep, been doing some puzzles. I think I've done 7 so far in the 5 or 6 weeks. So been watching some shows. We've finished the last season of Ozark, and started to watch Tiger King. It's hard to kind of finish. I think we still have a couple episodes left, but so yeah, stuff like that. Hanging out with the kids, playing some games, trying to get outside. We've been fishing a little bit. We got a pond right outside our house, so it's been fun with our kids to do that. And reading some too. So got some books in the works. I've been reading a little bit of that. Trying to do some takeout from local restaurants, beer from local breweries.
Nice. Yeah, I've been to Lexington a handful of times. I had the honor to be able to come there and hang out with you guys a couple times last year, and definitely got a lot of great local restaurants and breweries around town. So that's exciting. How is Ozark? I've been meaning to get into that.
Oh, you haven't seen it at all?
No, I've never watched it.
I mean, I think it's a great show. I mean, it's one of those slow burn, super intense shows that they do a great job of creating that tension. I'm not going to give stuff away but I mean, it's involves the cartel and involves a guy who's financial guy who gets involved. Jason Bateman's awesome. Laura Linney's his wife's name, the actress. She's great too. So it's a great. I love the show. I think it's pretty unique in the way that it crafts the story and just keeps that intensity going for episode after episode. So definitely recommend it.
Well, I'm going to have to be sure to get into that soon. And I do want to thank you again for coming on. I'm really excited to do this episode together and dive into some of the current happenings in sports right now, especially as there isn't much going on in that world. And before we get into all that, you already talked about briefly kind of your role that you have right now at Crossroads Lexington, but would you give our listeners a little more context for how you and I know each other and some of the specifics of what you're doing for work currently?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you know Corey or you follow the podcast, you might know he's from Northeast Ohio. And I'm actually from Lexington, but we moved to Northeast Ohio and we're there a little over 7 years. And I was on staff at a church in Canton, and then helped start a church in Canton after that. And Corey went to Malone, and so was also in Canton. And we connected through just mutual friends, and Corey was a part of the church plant that we did, and so we became close through that. And one little known fact that Corey's probably not mentioned on this podcast is we coached a youth basketball team together, and that was quite the experience. And our team was not very good, and I don't think we won a game, did we, Corey?
No, I actually haven't talked about that at all. I think I kept that out of my memory because of how terrible we were.
That was quite the experience one summer. That was fun to do, but yeah, it would have been more fun if our team was a little better. But yeah, we just became friends for that and have stayed in touch as we moved. It's been 8 years ago that we moved back from Northeast Ohio to Lexington. And I took a job at a church called Crossroads and was doing some on the teaching team and working with groups and things like that. And then our church became a part of this larger church called Crossroads that's based in Cincinnati about 3 years ago. And I've had different roles in the last 3 years. Things changed a lot with this church called Crossroads. So now I'm doing local kind of community partner stuff, and I'm working with groups in Lexington at our campus. So we have a few campuses in Central Kentucky, and then a bunch in Cincinnati area, and one in Columbus now.
Yeah, I think when I was living in Ohio doing the laundry project, that we actually worked a little bit with the local Crossroads there as part of the big, massive serve day that you guys do.
You did. I think it was the Mason campus, maybe.
I just remember that it was a really great experience. We had been consistently doing projects in the Loveland, Ohio and Cincinnati, Ohio area, and it was cool to be able to partner with Crossroads. And as you're kind of recounting our friendship and how we know each other, it's cool to look back, and it's crazy to believe it's already been 8 years since you moved from Ohio back to Lexington, and it's been one of the greater joys for me on a personal level for us to be able to keep in touch and catch up over the years and maintain a friendship. And like I mentioned earlier, just the opportunity to be out in Lexington in person and spend time with you and your family has been really cool. And, to the point of our basketball team that we coached together, let's not let how poorly we did that year get in the way of our discussion about The Last Dance and the Michael Jordan doc, because you, perhaps more than I, are a big-time NBA nerd. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you play in college?
I did. I played at a small Christian college, which was fun. It was my dad was a high school basketball coach too, so I mean, I lived and breathed basketball growing up. Ran a basketball camp in the summer. My dad was like the co-director of basketball camp with Kyle Macy, who actually played with Michael Jordan. So the degrees of separation are pretty small if you want to look at it that way. And so Kyle Macy he was an All-American at Kentucky and then played in the NBA for 8 or 10 years and played on the Bulls for a few years. So yeah, and I got to play in college a little bit, which is fun.
Wow, Kevin Bacon would be proud at that 6 degrees separation right there. Had no idea.
Yep.
So this doc, we'll go ahead and dive into The Last Dance here. This doc was highly anticipated. I think most people know the story of it by now, how they had to get MJ's permission to film it and then to release it as a documentary, and how much of the footage it's built around the footage they got from the 97-98 season, the Bulls' final championship run. And we're gonna dive into all the stuff surrounding that, but it basically sat on a shelf for 20 years. ESPN finally released it. They were going to release it in partnership with Netflix. It was going to air on ESPN this summer, but because of the pandemic, they moved it up to April to now. And so we already have episodes 1 and 2 in the books. The final 8 episodes are going to be pieced out 2 at a time over the next several weeks. And in episodes 1 and 2, they spend a lot of time creating context, creating a background for that Bulls team, for Michael Jordan's career. They talk about his North Carolina days, him getting drafted, the famous Trailblazers picking Sam Bowie ahead of him. And
who's from Kentucky, by the way, played at Kentucky. Yep. Which is located where I am.
Yeah, and they went ahead and the consensus was that even to this day you'd still pick Hakeem Olajuwon first overall regardless, and MJ went third. So they chronicle that. They talk about some of his early Bulls days, him scoring 63 on the Celtics in the 85-86 playoffs, and on. They talk about Scottie Pippen, his injury in that final season, Phil Jackson, his last year, and the tension between the team and management. And it's cool how they've contextualized it to basically just dive they go back and forth with, it's centered around this 97-98 season, but they go back in time and then they bring it back, and there's a lot of jumping around, but it all fits really well together. So you and I are far enough in age that we each have a different perspective on this documentary and some of the stuff we're seeing. So that's kind of how I want to focus our conversation around it, is from those two different perspectives. So I guess my first question to you about The Last Dance would be, as someone who watched Michael Jordan during your formative years and lived much of this in real time, what was your initial reaction to the doc?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of nostalgia. I mean, which is what a lot of people have communicated, that, just brings back a ton of memories. I mean, I'm 41, so, Michael Jordan was my favorite player growing up by far. It wasn't close. I don't really remember his college days. I was, 5 or 6 when, he's really playing college, but, became a Jordan fan, I think probably in about 87, 86, and was just kind of, in some ways obsessed with Jordan since then. And, I remember arguments I had with relatives about how Jordan would never win championships, and, he was just a one-on-one player, and, all this kind of stuff. And I would argue, no, he's the best player, And so it just brought a ton back. And I think part of it too is, maybe you feel the same way, but it shows you how much basketball, just like the industry of basketball, has changed in the last, 30 plus years, 30 to 40 years, like from when Jordan was in high school to now, how different things are. And really just how different the NBA was. I mean, the Bulls was such a sad, pathetic franchise when they drafted Jordan. And just thinking about how the draft was, looking at the draft, and how it was just such not a big deal. At least it didn't feel like that at all. And how much people like Bird, Magic, Jordan completely changed the NBA. And by the way, there's no way that you can say that the Rockets would take Olajuwon again. Like, right, they would take Jordan again if they could redo it. I mean, I don't think anyone faults them for taking Olajuwon, like like you fault Portland for taking Sam Bowie. But come on, if you're redrafting and you can do it all over again, knowing what you know now, you'd take Jordan.
Oh, no doubt. It's just more so in the moment that nobody could fault them for taking Olajuwon. And look, I mean, they won 2 titles with the guy, so
they did, yeah. So it's certainly not a bad pick, and he's an all-time great player as well. But yeah, so I'm eating it up, seeing his college days, seeing the high school footage. Love, it brings back so much, from my childhood.
Yeah, and it was a different era for sure, and you need look no further than the whole cocaine circus they highlighted around that team he was drafted into, and how crazy that was. And that harkens back to an entirely different time about the NBA, and really provides context for how many people say that as you alluded to, that Jordan did transform the league. He put the NBA on the map like no other had before him, and that includes Bird and Magic, who made great strides in putting the NBA on the map, but Jordan took it to a whole other level and really changed the game. And one of my favorite stories from the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance so far, that 85-86 season where Jordan was injured and they had him on a minutes restriction, and you see the difference between then and now, just in terms of the competitiveness. Not to say guys today are any less competitive, but Jordan just had a different competitive fuel and fire burning in him that was out of this world. I mean, he was secretly training and rehabbing so he could play. The Bulls were trying to tank because they ended up going 30-52 in that 85-86 season and just made the playoffs and could have had a pick in the lottery. And Jordan just wouldn't allow it to happen. He played lights out. He was ultra competitive, and there was no thought of load management like there is now, stuff like that. How did that stick out to you, just in terms of highlighting, his overall drive and what fueled him as a player?
Yeah, it's funny because I mean the team, was saying load management, but obviously he didn't want to hear any of that, and it's just funny because like that could never happen today, right? You could never have somebody going and playing pickup games at his college, and nobody and the team not know about it and things like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's one of his great characteristics is his competitive drive and he hated to lose. You've probably seen the story Jamal Crawford talked about recently about him losing a pickup game and how he was just so mad about it. And it's just funny to think about it. But that had to, like, those early Bulls years had to be challenging for him. I mean, they won the championship in North Carolina his first year. They didn't win the next 2 years. They were really good, and he was great those 2 years, but they didn't win at all. I don't even think they went to the Final Four either one of those years. But they were really good. They won most of their games. But those first couple of years where they weren't very good had to be hard for him to lose like that. When you think about the rest of his career, when they weren't going to the finals against the Pistons, they were still, really good and going deep in the playoffs. So, but yeah, I mean, his competitive drive to get back to play, even though he could have easily just, waited until the following year is pretty remarkable. And then to go into that playoffs and drop 63 is pretty, and 49 the first game, then 63. It's pretty incredible. That's one of my first memories of him is that 63-point playoff game for sure.
Yeah, and you have that famous quote from Bird about that wasn't Michael Jordan, that was God disguised as Michael Jordan, which is one of my all-time favorite NBA quotes just in general.
It is. Another great quote real quick too is, what about Bobby Knight after during the Olympics period saying that Jordan's the best player he's ever seen? That's a pretty remarkable thing that he had said at that point.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan hadn't even played his first NBA game yet, I don't think, at that point, and to say something like that of him was pretty incredible. What is your biggest takeaway so far, or something you gained a new perspective on?
I mean, I think it's just the human aspect of it, right? I mean, you're seeing the human aspect of it, and other people have brought this up, but I mean, I don't remember, especially you get into the second episode around contracts and Jerry Krause and Reinsdorf. I mean, you knew a little bit of that was going on, but it just, when you're in college, I was in college when that season was, the 97-98 season was going on. And you just, I know Pippen, I remember a little bit that Pippen was wanting to trade and things like that, but you didn't really know all the ins and outs of what was going on with an organization like you do now, like you would now, with access that we have to people. So I think that was maybe the biggest takeaway is for me is the human side of it, and just thinking about these people, thinking about Jordan as an individual, seeing him with the behind the scenes footage, seeing Phil Jackson, Jerry Krause, which just seems ridiculous that he was a GM. Just looking at him seems ridiculous. And even how he got his job. Like, why did they give him that job? That just goes to show you how different things are now too, that he was like a scout for the White Sox and somehow got that job, and made some incredible moves, but was also an idiot in many ways too. So, yeah, I don't know. The human side of it for me was fascinating. And like, my wife is not a big sports fan, and she watched it and was pretty intrigued by it just because of the human element that you see.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That was the thing that I think stuck out the most for me as well. Is I was 9 or 10 years old at the time, so I had really no perception of organizational leadership, especially as it applied to sports. I had no perception of the toxic relationship between, especially Scottie Pippen and team management, but between the team and Jerry Krause especially. And even then, just the fact that I was young, that, like you said, there was not as much, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't 1,000 articles being pumped out a day, there wasn't all this focus on the relationship between players and team management. A lot of stuff was hidden, was behind the scenes. And it was just, that was, I agree, that was my biggest takeaway, and the thing that was the craziest to me is just how toxic it was, and the reality that there was no reason that team shouldn't have stayed together at least a couple more years. There was no reason to put Phil Jackson on just a 1-year deal to try and force him out, to not give Scottie Pippen a better contract. And for all the stuff that Jerry Krause did that was good, the fact that he was willing to just try and dismantle that team and go through a rebuild that ultimately ended up happening 2, 3, 4 times, just kind of did not work out, was just crazy to me that you wouldn't want to just try and keep running it back. I had no idea things were that bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's ridiculous about it, that Reinsdorf would keep Jerry Krause over everybody else, right? That was ultimately the decision that was made, that he is going to stay with Jerry Krause over Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen. You know, that's crazy to think about. And that in many ways, Jerry Reinsdorf has been an awful owner, and yet was just blessed by the fact that they drafted Michael Jordan and did have a GM who did make some good decisions on, you know, in terms of drafting Horace Grant and Pippen and so you got to give Krause credit for that. But the fact that at that point you couldn't see that, yeah, we need to try to keep this together, and that Krause was so confident in his skills that he could do a rebuild, and obviously it's never happened. It's never happened with the Bulls. And I think it was just a few years after that they drafted. They had didn't they have the number 1 and the number 3 pick a few years after that, and they drafted Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry, 2 big guys in the same draft. I don't know if you remember that, but
yeah, and the year before that it was Elton Brand, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just indicative of of the Bulls trying to do this. But yeah, you're 100% right. And funny because that 99 season was the strike season, right? And that the Spurs won the shortened season. And yeah, there's no question that the Bulls would have probably won that pretty easily, I think. And so so 2000 was 2000 the beginning of the Lakers run, or was it 2001, 2003? I can't remember that they started that first three-peat.
I think it was I want to say it was the 2000-2001 season, but I think we could be a year off on that. But yeah, that's when they started their run against the Sixers, the Pacers, and the Nets.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who won it in 2000, because it was the Spurs in 99 and that shortened season, I believe. Isn't that right? And then I'm not sure who won it in 2000. But yeah, they could have easily kept it together a couple more years if Reinsdorf would have just been like, I'm gonna stay with these guys and not Jerry Krause. Yeah.
I think one of the more interesting things about this doc too, and this is the last point I want to touch on before we transition to talking about the round 1 of the draft, is, for my generation, there's been a huge debate about who's the GOAT, LeBron or MJ, and it's all recency bias, right? Like for my generation, it's easy to be very biased towards someone like LeBron because that's who we have the most experience watching and spending time with, and he's so gifted and dominant. But I think one of the interesting things to me that this doc is going to do and reshape the perspective of my generation and younger is I think it's going to cement Jordan's GOAT status. And you already grew up thinking that. What do you think about that debate between him and LeBron?
Yeah, and I'm glad we're talking about this because it is a fascinating conversation. And I mean, I compare Jordan to Tom Brady. Like, here's the deal. I kind of think LeBron, and maybe you could potentially even say somebody like Giannis. I mean, he's got a long way to go, but could be better all-around players. But they'll never be considered the greatest of all time by most people because of Jordan's success. Like, and it's the same with Tom Brady. Like, Tom Brady has 6 Super Bowls. Like, I think Patrick Mahomes will end up being better, but he'll never, unless Mahomes wins 5 or 6 Super Bowls, will never be considered the greatest of all time above Tom Brady because of Brady's success. And so that's kind of my perspective on it. Like, yeah, Jordan's always going to be considered by the majority of people the GOAT because of that. And obviously an unbelievable all-around player. But the fact that he went to 6 finals, didn't lose any of them, LeBron's been to 9 and it's 3 and 6, he'll never be able to overcome that in the minds of most people, in my opinion. I mean, obviously it doesn't really matter that much. It's a fun conversation to have. I love talking about it, but just all-around player, I mean, LeBron's like nothing we've ever seen, right? I mean, people want to compare him to Magic, but he's a much better scorer than Magic ever was. And he's just so big and physical, where Jordan was just so consistent. I think that was the thing about him. He was so consistent and kept that level of greatness going to such a such a late stage in his career too. I think is pretty remarkable. And people will always be able to look back and say, like, he won 6 titles and it very easily could have been 8. I don't know that they would have won 8 in a row. Like, that seems really hard to win 8 in a row. They won 3 in a row twice, but 8 in a row seems like it would have been really hard to do. And the team would have looked a little bit different during those 2 years in terms of some people that came and went. Maybe they would have. It's certainly possible. I think a lot of people can look back on it and be like, well, they won 6 out of 8, and those 2 years they didn't win it, Jordan didn't play full seasons. And but yeah, that's my general take. My hot take is I kind of think LeBron's a better overall player. Like, that's my hot take, but he'll be considered, like, he will not be able to overtake Jordan as far as the GOAT conversation because of the success. And I think Brady and Mahomes is a comparable analogy in football, whereas Brady is going to be considered the GOAT, unless somebody comes along and wins as many Super Bowls as he does and puts up better numbers.
Well, we may never know as a result of this year and what happened with the NBA season, but what about if LeBron wins a 4th with the Lakers, 3 titles on 3 teams? Do you think that does anything to put him over Jordan?
In some people's minds, maybe, but I still think the general consensus is that Jordan's going to be the GOAT. And part of this conversation too is tricky because, how do you even bring up people like Bill Russell, Kareem to a certain extent, because it just seems like it's in terms of the modern era, which Jordan and Bird, Magic kind of brought in the modern era. It's hard to bring people back from before that, but in terms of the modern era, yeah. If Jordan won a 4th one, I think you'd have more people start to go that way. I mean, you obviously have people like Nick Wright who already think Jordan that LeBron is the GOAT, and I'm sure there's other people that think that too. But I think the majority of people aren't going to go that direction, in my opinion, because of the success.
Yeah, I know. I think this doc is going to cement Jordan's GOAT status. I don't think it's actually that hot a take to say LeBron is a better overall player. I think that's accurate, and I would be interested to see what happens if LeBron can win a 4th ring with the Lakers, how that changes the conversation. But I think after this documentary is said and done, I think it's really going to cement Jordan's status in a lot of people's minds, regardless of what LeBron does in the future. Let's go ahead and pivot to talking about the NFL draft. What did you think big picture with the draft? What was the biggest surprise to you? What team did you like the most what they did? What team did you think did the worst? What were some of your like big picture takeaways with round 1 of the draft?
Man, I mean, first off, it was just nice to have it, right? I mean, it felt good to have the draft. As strange as it was to see coaches in their living rooms, the picture where Belichick was just perfect, right? And then see Cliff Kingsbury in his whatever kind of freaking mansion he was in. But it was just good to have the draft. I mean, I think it gave a sense of normalcy, and that, maybe we'll have sports again. That's the looming question over all of this is, well, we don't know when sports are going to come back. We don't know when fans are going to be able to come back. There's just so many unanswered questions with what the sports landscape's going to look like. Hopefully we'll get NBA in the summer probably without fans, but hopefully we'll get it back, and hopefully we'll get normal football season, but we don't know. So it was just great to have the draft. But I think one takeaway, and I'll look at it from a couple different angles. You got a fantasy football angle that I probably care about as much as anything, and you do too. But I think the AFC North got better quite a bit. I mean, I think the Bengals aren't going to be a joke with Joe Burrow. I'm pretty high on him. I think he'll instantly make them a lot better. And I think they made, like their first round pick from last year didn't play at all. He's a lineman, and he'll be back. So it's almost like getting 2 first round picks in probably a franchise quarterback. I mean, there's no way to know, but it's rare to have the number one overall pick as a quarterback be a bust. I mean, Jamarcus Russell is obviously one that happened like that, but it's rare, and I think Burrow will be good. And I think the Browns got better with Jedrick Wills. He's from Lexington, by the way, and I remember I followed his high school career some, and it came down. I was hoping he'd go to Kentucky, being a Kentucky fan, but he picked Alabama. You can't blame him for that. But he played on a high school team who had another 5-star offensive lineman, public high school that my wife went to, called Lafayette. And he went to Kentucky, and Jedrick Wills went to Alabama. But that was the pick I wanted to happen for the Browns. And growing up in Lexington, I've always kind of rooted for the Bengals. They've obviously not. They've had kind of a bad history so over the Browns. So I hope both those teams. I root for both those teams. So living in Northeast Ohio for 7 years, and I think the Browns, that was the right pick for the Browns. It was the smart pick. So the AFC North got better. That's one take. Obviously the Jordan Love pick to the Packers is interesting. Why they would go that direction? What does that say? Are they really thinking Rodgers has maybe a year or two? Like what's the thought process behind that? I don't really understand that. I don't understand why you wouldn't draft a receiver when that seems like an obvious need. Now this is maybe the deepest draft for receiver in a long time. So maybe they're like, well, we'll get one in the second round, but I don't know. I don't really understand that pick. They must be really high on Jordan Love to use their first round pick on him. So I don't know. I mean, I love that the Dolphins drafted Tua. I mean, I think that would have been really dumb not to. So I'm glad he went there. Jerry Jeudy falling to the Broncos is interesting. That offense could get really good really fast. The Cowboys getting CD. I mean, that they should put up a ton of points next year. Dak Prescott, QB1, QB2, I don't know, QB3. I mean, he'll be a really good fantasy quarterback next year. It hurts Amari Cooper as far as and Michael Gallup for sure. But anyway, those are a few takes. And what about you? I mean, what stuck out to you?
The top of the draft went pretty much chalk with Burrow, Young, and Okudah being the top 3 picks. I was surprised there wasn't as much, maybe not surprised with the virtual nature of the draft, but that there wasn't as much trading that was happening. And especially in the earlier part of the draft, I should say, there wasn't as much trading going on, and a lot of it went chalk. I think the first kind of, not really a surprise because we figured they'd draft offensive line, but the Giants taking Andrew Thomas. I thought he would fall to the Browns, and he was somebody that I was hoping for the Browns, but you and I were talking about it before the draft, and I agree that Wills was a great pickup for the Browns, and a lot of people had Wills as being their best tackle of those big 4. So I think that was a slam dunk pick for the Browns, and he'll have to make that transition over to left tackle. But I was listening to Joe Thomas talk about it, and I think he's going to have it's going to be a transition for sure, but I think he'll be able to do it. And I love the Dolphins getting Tua. I think that was a smart pick. It makes me question the rumors if they were really trying to trade up with the Bengals or not. They ended up getting Tua. I think that was a great decision for that organization. Tank for Tua in full effect came through. The Chargers taking a flyer on Herbert, I thought was a good idea because you got to get a quarterback. So regardless of how it pans out, he'll sit behind Taylor for a little bit. They'll do what the Browns did with Taylor and Mayfield, and
do you think that will happen? I mean, why not go ahead and play? That's the thing I don't understand. And if Tua's healthy, he should play. Like I don't know. That's just my take on it. Like, man, these guys are so much more ready than they used to be to play right away. So we'll see. I kind of think Herbert will end up being the starter.
Oh, I agree. I think they should just do away with the facade and play these guys. Tua is different because you have the health concerns, but someone like Herbert, they tried that with Taylor and Mayfield on the Browns and ended up being like, well, why not just start Mayfield from the jump? So I think the Chargers that'll end up happening in the first couple games. They'll end up starting Herbert. One of the bigger surprises to me in the earlier set of picks was the Panthers going Derek Brown over Isaiah Simmons. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Isaiah Simmons is obviously an absolute freak. But I mean, you can't go wrong with shoring up your defensive line. So I mean, the Derek Brown pick's good. I mean, I think the pick's good for both teams. I mean, I think the first pick that made you really wonder was the Ruggs pick to the Raiders, right? I mean, Andrew Thomas is also a pick that a lot of people were surprised about, just because he was generally rated the lowest of those four tackles, by a lot of people, at least. I'm sure there was people who had it differently, but that they could have gotten any of those guys, and they picked Andrew Thomas. Seems interesting. So, well, it's like last year the Giants too. I mean, they kind of, I mean, picking Daniel Jones when you probably could have gotten him in the second round and taken him 7 overall. You at least could have gotten him with your second first round pick. So the Giants have some interesting draft history with Gettleman.
Yeah, Dave Gettleman. It's not as controversial as the Jones pick was at the time, but I agree it was a surprise. And I agree about Ruggs being a surprise. One of the biggest early surprises, because I even texted you. I was like, you're right, they got Ruggs, classic Raiders. And I'm like, over Lamb and Judy, I appreciate what the Raiders are trying to do. First of all, they already have their burner in Hunter Renfrow, which I shouldn't joke about Hunter Renfrow. I got some fantasy football dynasty stock in him, so I'm rooting for the white slot receiver in Renfrow for sure. But I was surprised they took Ruggs over a CeeDee Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy, and I really liked what Tampa Bay did, though, getting a tackle to shore up the line for Tom Brady. I think Tampa Bay is going to be formidable this year.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they'll be as good as the Saints. I think the Saints but I think they're definitely in position to be a wild card team. But who knows? I mean, we don't know exactly what the Saints will be. I mean, I think the Saints will be really good. But I mean, yeah, I think Tampa. I mean, their defense is going to be a question mark, but they should put up a good amount of points. And that was a good pick there. Yeah, that guy's obviously a freak of nature, Tristan Wirfs. So yeah, it's a good pick. And Mekhi Becton's interesting, going to the Jets. I mean, obviously they needed that for Darnold. You just wondered the whole thing with the combine, the drug test. I don't know. Is there enough red flags with him? I mean, he is another just freak of nature in terms of how big he is and how he moves. That's obviously talked about by a lot of people, but he came into Louisville out of shape. I don't know. Are those red flags?
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out, but I think that was a good pick. I will say something that stuck out to me, because I'm like you. I think a lot in terms of fantasy football. I really like that pairing of Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton in Denver. I think they're giving Drew Lock every opportunity to succeed in that offense, and I think that's going to be a really fun one. And then CeeDee Lamb to the Cowboys. That was a big-time surprise for sure, that Jones, instead of taking someone to shore up the secondary, that he would take CD after they just signed Amari Cooper to a big-time contract, and having the likes of Michael Gallup, like you mentioned. His stock went way down for me fantasy-wise. I mean, he'll still be good and produce, and we'll see how it plays out, but I have him in a dynasty league. He was somebody I was really pumped about, and the fact that they got CD and Cooper and Gallup and Zeke, they're going to be putting up 100 points a game. Like you said, I mean, it's going to be,
they will.
Insane.
They will. It'll be really hard to predict which receiver is going to go off. I think that's the thing that's going to be difficult about the Cowboys. You can trust. I think you're going to be able to trust Dak, and you're going to be able to trust Zeke, but it's going to be like game to game for those receivers on. So that's my opinion on how that's going to play out. I was really glad he didn't go to the 49ers like that. They just don't throw the ball very much. Like, I would hate to be a receiver in that offense. Like, that would be terrible to get drafted there, in my opinion. They ended up drafting that receiver from Arizona State, right? Brandon Akoy, I think is his name.
Yeah, they traded up to get him at 25.
Yeah, they traded up to get him at 25. But man, that would not be a fun system to be a receiver in, and I want no part of any of those wide receivers for fantasy football either. One, do you trust Jimmy G? Two, they run the ball more than anybody else, except for the Ravens. So it's like I don't really want any receivers from the Ravens except for Mark Andrews. So
I don't know, man. I got Marquise Brown and Miles Boykin. I think Boykin's going to take a step up, and I like what Brown can do if he stays healthy.
I hear you, but they're going to run the ball so much. It's just going to be hard to count on their production consistently. Like Marquise Brown could obviously blow up and have a huge game, catch 5 balls for 180 yards, 3 touchdowns, which he did a couple times. But he could also have games where he does nothing because they're going to run the ball a ton.
Well, they had talked about potentially, there was talk of the Ravens taking a receiver in the first round, but they ended up going with Patrick Queen. What did you think of that pick?
Remind me who he is. That's one pick that I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to.
Yeah, so Patrick Queen is linebacker. I don't know. I forget what school he's from off the top of my head, but I read a lot of mock drafts and a lot of draft guys that had him ranked as a pretty great defensive player, and it just seems overall that he's going to add a really dynamic presence to their defense, which they definitely need to complement that offense.
Yeah, the Ravens, the AFC North is just going to be fascinating next year in general. Big Ben coming back, Ken Lamar, can he stay healthy for one, and can he keep it up, and how will defenses adjust to him? Will they be able to adjust to him very much? Because his season was obviously just ridiculous, and he definitely has to be the fantasy quarterback to take first because of his rushing ability. But yeah, Mark Andrews next year. I'd be tempted to take him as the top overall tight end with them trading Hayden Hurst out of there. So he should have a monster year. He's the one guy catching passes that you can count on.
I don't know, man. You might want to look at Gronk for that top tight end spot now in Tampa Bay. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I have Andrews also in that dynasty league, and Jackson as well. I've like the all Ravens team. So I'm excited for what that offense is going to do.
But for them to take a defensive player, that makes sense. I think in a lot of ways, the 49ers and the Ravens, who a lot of people thought would be the Super Bowl, could have been easily the Super Bowl. They're going at it the same way. We're gonna run the ball a ton. Obviously, very different quarterbacks, but we're gonna run more than anybody else in the league. We're gonna have a solid defense, and we're gonna go at it that way, and we're gonna control the clock. But yeah, it's obviously different because Jimmy G and Lamar are so different as far as quarterbacks. But it's a similar approach. That's think how different it is than like the Chiefs or somebody like the Packers. I don't know. So actually, the Packers ran the ball quite a bit last year too.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how the skill position players play out in rounds 2 and 3. And there were 6 wide receivers taken in the first round. I like the fit for most of them. I don't, not to bury the lead, we've gone too long without talking about, obviously, the biggest surprise that you mentioned. How on earth did the Packers justify trading up to take Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers when he was just on media that day? Aaron Rodgers was talking about how he'd love to see them draft a skill player. You got 3 years left of Rodgers. He's 36. Like, what were they thinking?
That's what I mean. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking there. They must love some Jordan Love. They must think he's, but I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, what, you're paying Rodgers so much money. He takes up such a big portion of your salary cap. You clearly need more weapons. And you go that direction. It doesn't make more sense. And I'm wondering who made that decision. Was it LaFleur? Was it the front office? Like, who actually pulled the trigger on that? Like, it's baffling to me. Maybe they didn't think Jordan Love would be there. Maybe they thought he'd go in the middle of the first round, and they're like, wow, well, we can get him to the end of the first round. That's such a value. But it doesn't make sense to me when they could have gotten a legitimate weapon there for him. Now, maybe they're like, second round we'll draft a receiver, but why not take a defensive player then, or take an O lineman there? Like, do something to shore up your team than a guy that's going to sit on the sideline for. And unless you're not committed to Rodgers, unless you're thinking about trading him, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
No, it doesn't, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out, and with the whole locker room dynamic and the relationship between LaFleur and Rodgers this year. Yeah, I'm not sure what they were thinking there. I think from a fantasy perspective, Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU was the first running back taken in the draft. He goes to Kansas City. A lot of comparisons to Brian Westbrook of the Eagles days with Andy Reid. And, there's talk like in dynasty leagues, he's a lot of people are saying he's already the clear first pick overall. What did you? I think it's a dream come true. What did you make of that? Him being the first running back taken was a surprise. What did you make of that pick and that fit?
It's interesting because I think Damian Williams is really good. I mean, so they still have him, if you remember. I mean, the trouble with Chiefs running backs since Andy Reid has been there is it's hard to trust running backs on a consistent week-to-week basis. Like Damian Williams in the regular season was in many ways a disappointment. I mean, injuries, they for some reason give LaShawn McCoy a bunch of run. So, I mean, obviously I think he'll get his, but I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I think somebody like Jonathan Taylor is going to be a better dynasty play because it's going to be clear. He's probably going to go to a system where he's going to be more of a 3-down back. Like I think Helaire, he'll catch a bunch of passes, but will he be the first and second down back? Who will be the goal line back? That's the kind of stuff that it's going to be hard to predict with him. And Damian Williams is still young, and he is. I mean, you think about Damian Williams the last 2 playoffs, he has been unbelievable in those 2 playoff runs, like incredible. But he's probably not going to be your every down back either. So I think it's going to be a clear committee with those two. So, and they're both cheap. Like Damian Williams isn't making that much money, and he'll be on a rookie contract. So they're both going to be really cheap, and they both fit the system really well. So I don't know. That's my take. I mean, the dynasty thing, who knows? But as far as next year goes, I mean, I don't know. I'd rather have somebody like Jonathan Taylor.
I think your love for Damian Williams might be your hottest take on this whole podcast.
Dude, I mean, he very easily could have been Super Bowl MVP, but he was great in every game in the playoffs. Last year, if you remember, he was great in the playoffs. Like his game against the Patriots in the AFC Championship, I mean, he was ridiculous. And if you remember, Tyreek Hill and Kelsey didn't have good games. And he was ridiculous. So he's been like, he's one of those guys that'll go down as like a little, random tidbit, but like some of his playoff numbers for a running back have to be, as far as these 2 playoffs, have to be some of the best ever.
Well, I feel like a lot of his production was due to the Chiefs offense, but I think it says it's less about, for me, Damian Williams, and I think it speaks more to why Clyde Edwards-Helaire is such a dream fit in this offense, because if you can take a guy like Damian Williams, who I think is a really good player, but may not be a starter on a lot of teams around the league, and you put a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that offense, and just think about what he's going to do. I agree. I don't think he's going to be an every down back necessarily, but I think, fantasy wise, he's going to put up some huge numbers, and it's going to be a really exciting fit. And I agree with a guy like Taylor. A lot of people have him projected to go to the Colts. By the time this airs, or the Dolphins, by the time this airs, we'll see where he ends up, and we'll know more about that. But anything else, as we wrap up the draft, anything else that really stuck out to you, or what you're excited about, assuming the season, we'll see what happens in September, but anything you're kind of looking forward to coming out of the draft?
I'm interested to see, and this is just my personal bias, interested to see where Lynn Bowden goes. He's, Kentucky. He'll can play multiple positions. Receiver, had to play quarterback after our quarterback got hurt, and ended up leading the SEC in rushing, which is pretty crazy. And in 8 games, led the SEC in rushing, basically, where he was, playing quarterback and running 80% of the time. So he's projected as a 3rd-round pick, and I think he'll be a solid weapon for whoever he goes to. So I'm interested to see where that happens. I'm really interested to see where he goes. Obviously, I'm fascinated to see what the Patriots will do. Are they going to draft a quarterback? Are they really going to go with Jared Stidham as their quarterback next year? Like that's going to be fascinating to see what happens with them. I tell you, another baffling pick from the first round was the Seahawks pick. Didn't they drafted a linebacker, and like it seemed like one of their lowest needs. A
lot of the writers I follow on Twitter that cover the Seahawks or talk about the Seahawks claimed it as just a typical Seahawks pick, and they're clearly they're doing the strategy of just trying to build strength on strength.
Yeah. But, I feel like they need help. I mean, I think Metcalf is going to be a stud. Tyler Lockett's had some injury issues. I think they need some more weapons for Russell Wilson. So do they trust their running backs moving forward? Those guys have all had injury issues. So I don't know. Could they go Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift? Could they go one of those guys? It'd be interesting to see. I mean, Rashad Penny was a first-round pick, like, what, two drafts ago?
Yeah, Seahawks have such a interesting history with those running backs and drafting them.
They do. Yeah, they do. And Carson was pretty good, but he's had some injury issues, and so is Penny. So we'll see. Packers need more weapons. Like, come on, draft somebody. And a lot of people thought Lynn Bowden could go there and, kind of fill the Randall Cobb role from a few years ago. He'll probably be more of a slot guy and can do some different things, but we'll see. Yeah,
there's still a lot of deep skill position talent in this draft. So
you're going to see a ton of running backs go tonight, right? I mean, that's the thing that's going to happen. So you're going to see a bunch of running backs. And the thing you can know about from a fantasy perspective is that a lot of those guys are going to be good fantasy picks. I mean, it's that's why running backs don't get paid that much. That's why they're expendable. It's because you can get solid value in the second, third, and fourth, fifth rounds. There's a lot of guys you can get and plug them in right away, playing for 2-3 years, and then move on. So unfortunately for those running backs, that's the way it kind of works.
Yeah, I think for this draft especially, it's so stacked from a skill position perspective that it'll be really fascinating to see in terms of fantasy how things end up. I think it's going to be a really fun year of fantasy football. I just think there's so much to look forward to, and like you said up top, I'm just happy that the draft is back, that we got some sports to talk about and pay attention to, and to that end, this has been a pretty unique episode of the Easter Pod in that we have a guest on, but we're not really necessarily talking about what you do for a living or anything like that. So we'll definitely have to get you back on, and I know you and I could have a lot of fascinating conversations about a lot of different topics. So we'll have to get you back on and maybe expand on your thoughts on politics and theology sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'd love it. And, heck, we should just do a fantasy football podcast in the fall too. So,
well, this is a secret edition. This is a secret audition to see how good we are in a podcast together and how much chemistry we have. But no, you and I have some of my favorite conversations about sports and theology and life and politics and a wide range of stuff. So that's why I was really excited to get you on and talk about this. And, I've just had fun chatting with you. I've had fun chatting with you about this. I don't know how many people are actually going to listen because neither of us are, in the media as experts or have like a big following necessarily. But, if nothing else, at the end of the day, I had a blast, and I really appreciate you coming on to nerd out with me about all this stuff. And I hope you had fun chatting about it also.
Hey, can I give one more take from The Last Dance real quick? Just as a follow up, because I wanted to mention this, but it kind of speaks to the NBA in general. I don't know if you felt the same way, but some of the guys that were in the NBA during that era, even during their last championship run, would have no chance of being in the NBA today. Do you not feel that way? I mean, the Bulls had a center named Joe Klein that was on their team. I remember him. There is no way that guy would be in the NBA now. I'm not sure Steve Kerr could play in the NBA today if he was in the league now.
I don't know about Kerr. I think Kerr would be fine, but I agree that in general it's a much different era. And look no further than that trade they made, Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright. You'd never see something like that happen today.
No, but I mean, you say Kerr would be fine. How many like 6'3" guards who all they can do is shoot, like can't do anything else, actually are in the NBA today? Like just who they're not. He wasn't a great athlete. I mean, you have somebody like Kyle Korver, but Kyle Korver's like 6'8". That guy, it's a little different. You can put him out there and he's big and he can shoot over people. I don't know. It just spoke to me like the top level of the NBA during that era was really good. I'm not sure if the depth of the NBA during that era was very good at all.
Oh, I think as a larger point, I completely agree that, we're blessed in this day and age with, the depth of talent in the NBA is off the charts compared to what it used to be. And so I 100% agree. I do think there still is a place for like a Kerr who, especially in a shooting league now.
Who do you compare him to, though? Like a 6'3", not quick shooter today, like who can't get his own shot ever. Like, who do you compare him to?
I don't think I think he would just sit in the corner and especially if he played with a guy like LeBron, I think he'd be lethal. It'd have to be the right fit. Maybe he couldn't play on every team, but
I'm just trying to think, is there anybody else like that in the league today?
It's a good point. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head because even the guys that are pure shooters, the NBA is a bit of a Swiss Army knife league now, so you have to be very dynamic athletically and able to space the floor and do a bunch of different things. So you might be right, but so it would look different. I think the most comparable thing between eras, or the thing that's most interesting, is you put this era back in the old era, and there's so much talk about how guys today would play back then. Would they be able to handle it, or now it's a softer league? I think it's the opposite. I think a lot of guys today would dominate if they went back in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the versatility that guys have today, is pretty remarkable. Yeah, it's pretty incredible overall. So, anyway, that was the thought I had when watching that. Is just that it was so much more traditional back then in terms of people's roles and people's kind of niches. Like, you'd have like a shooter on your team, who just come off and he's going to just shoot. But I don't know. But the fact that you had like a guy who's like 6'3" and can't get his own shot back then, who actually did pretty well, speaks to how different the game is today.
No, I agree completely. That was one of the fascinating takeaways about the comparison between eras, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes up in these next 8 episodes and what the takeaways are. And yeah, it's interesting. So we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna get out of here. But Brent, I just have to thank you one last time so much for coming on. I really had a great time, and we'll have to do this again soon for sure. There's going to be some more draft to break down. There's going to be more MJ docs. I mean, we'll have to find some way to fill the time without sports at some point in the coming months.
Yep. Thanks, Corey. Love being on. Love you, brother. And appreciate the invitation to be on this. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love you too, man. Looking forward to future conversations, and thanks again.
All right. We'll see you.